Your views, your news, your Limerick Today with Joe Nash on Live 95.
Now, we know that, and you presumably saw this on social media over the last 24 hours, people had some difficult journeys in aeroplanes due to Storm Isha, and some people had rocky landings, and others, the landing almost happened and the plane had to go back to base or divert elsewhere. Indeed, quite a few flights were diverted to Shannon Airport, and that leads to flights being out of position, and it takes time to deal with all of these things. But believe it or not, that's still relatively normal in aviation, and it's about pilots being safe and making sure that everybody does what they're supposed to do. But Falling Stars is a book due to be released shortly that recounts, unfortunately, plane crashes, and specifically in Shannon. Now, these are relatively historic. We're not talking about anything that recent, but it will bring new light to details that have been thought to be lost in time, while also showing the human stories of some of those involved. And Peter McGarry is a Limerick-based documentary filmmaker, and he is the person behind the book as well, and he's with me in the studio now. Hello, Peter. How are you?
Joe, it's a total pleasure to be with you here this morning.
So what got you interested in these plane crashes? As I say, these did not happen today or yesterday.
Mm-hmm. It goes back to 1979, the year of my leaving cert, and it's back in the old days of Big L Radio, which was in Ellen Street. We had a neighbour on the North Circular Road. His name was Arthur Quinlan, and one random night just happened to have the radio on, and they were talking about this subject, the history of air disasters at Shannon, 1946 to 61. And
I suppose I should say here now, Arthur Quinlan was not just any other neighbour. I mean, I knew Arthur well too at the start of my career, and he was the Irish Times journalist who did an awful lot of his work based at Shannon Airport.
Yeah, one could
in the early days
go so far as to say he was a legendary figure within journalism. But that particular night, Arthur rang in and he was talking about, I didn't know it at the time, it was an Italian crash, Alitalia crash in 1960, and he described a scene of driving in his little Austin 7 over the Humpback Bridge at Bunratty and looking all the way out to Newmarket and Fergus looking for this, and it actually turned out it was in a place called Clonlohan Cemetery, and the bit that you really couldn't make up in a movie script was the aircraft crashed, landed 40 seconds after taking off on, wait for it, a graveyard, which is like the scene out of a horror movie. But that was the start of it. In the 1980s and part of the 1990s, I was extremely fortunate to spend some time in the aircraft leasing and trading business, and my interest in aviation was always there, but it started to grow.
And look, you know, obviously air travel is remarkably safe, and it's become safer over the decades, hasn't it? But what you're focused on is maybe a slightly earlier time in aviation.
Yeah, the common theme is here, yes, aviation has become safer, far safer in recent times, and unfortunately the common denominator here is it's become safer, unfortunately, because of the crashes, and it's what's learned out of it. But and
you mentioned one crash. Your book presumably looks at others as well.
Yeah, the book is looking at 5 major crashes from 1946 to 1961. There are, let's call them, minor crashes included as well. So the book is the total record of it. And as you said in your introduction, I could have gone down the road of doing a forensic stroke historical take on it, which was really achieved in the documentaries. But what has come out in more recent years with my research are the human stories. And I think this is the fundamental difference here. And some truly remarkable stories played out in Shannon in those years.
Were there stories of survival as well?
Yeah, there was only one crash. There was a total write-off with the loss of everybody. That was the last crash, 1961. It was a charter airline called President Airlines. Again, it's covered in the book. And the human dimension in that chapter is was a beautiful lady by the name of Erica Urban. who was making her final flight. Her sister was in the business. She was an Austrian by birth, and they literally, living in Long Island, they flipped a coin as to see which sister would make that last flight. Unfortunately, it turned out to be Erica.
And she perished.
And it's all in the book. And
right. But as I say, there were also stories of remarkable survival from some of the other crashes.
There were, yeah. My book starts out in 1946 with the first crash, which is a Trans World Airlines, and the name of the aircraft it just conjures up just amazing travel. It was called the Star of Cairo, and that was the first major crash in Shannon, 28th of December 1946. There were survivors in it, and I was actually managed in 2008 to get in touch with a lady by the name of Vida Ferguson, and a remarkable phone call when she got this call out of the blue from this guy in Ireland talking about something that happened to her all of those years ago, and there was literally a pause on the line, and the minute I mentioned the date, she had it straight away. Again, it's in the book. You'll have to read it. An incredible story, incredible woman.
You brought a silver teapot with you. What's that about?
It's a coffee pot show.
Oh, it's a coffee pot.
I produced the first documentary I produced was a kind of just a roundup, a general roundup of all of the crashes lumped into one, and very surprisingly, it generated over 25,000 views on my YouTube channel. So I thought there's enough fuel there to realise other documentaries. One by one, I go through them. But a gentleman by the name of Pat O'Connell got in touch with me following another radio interview, and he said, "Look, I want to give you something." And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to get an artifact to go with this research." And I met him subsequently, and he opened his rucksack and he gave me this coffee pot. And his father was an APO, airport police officer, fire officer, and it was at the scene of the 1948 Pan American Empress of the Skies crash, which took place just short of runway 23, and he picked up the pot. But there is a totally extraordinary story that goes with that. It was a round-the-world flight. There was very wealthy people on board to be flying at those early days of aviation. There was a Lockheed employee by the name of Mark Worst on board. Mark was living on the North Circular Road in Limerick with his wife. His wife was a nurse in St. John's Hospital. His wife went out to the airport to pick him up, and as she was standing there, whatever arrangement had the airport at the time, she saw the crash taking place. This fireball a mile from the terminal building. So she pleaded with the fire crew to take her out. The woman was totally distraught. In the meantime, the aircraft impacted. Mark was sitting in the rear of the aircraft. The aircraft broke its back. A hole opened up. He literally fell through the hole onto the ground. The next thing he saw was a local farmer running towards it. The farmer had the idea that he could somehow save other people on board. Mark said, "For Christ's sake, just get out of here. It's going to blow." And within seconds of that, the whole thing went up in just a mushroom cloud. So his wife saw this and thought for sure he's gone.
Right.
And the next thing, as the flotilla of cars was pulling up, they could see a shadow walking from the flames. It was Mark.
Amazing. Absolutely remarkable story. And the pot comes from that, yeah. Okay, so you let us know when the book comes out, please, so that we can let listeners know. I think they'll be fascinated by it. Yeah,
the book is going into print, and if they get in touch with me on my email, it's petermcgarry123@gmail.com. I'll let you know how to get it and how much it's going to cost. It's not exorbitant.
Great. Falling Stars. Well, listen, thank you very much, Peter McGarry, for telling us some remarkable stories this morning.
Thank you very much, Joe. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Your views, your news, your Limerick Today with Joe Nash.